Ribbon here with another GameLit book review. Mild spoilers. The Regency and Victorian time periods are solidly the territory of romance novels. Upper-class families must secure advantageous marriages for their children, but said children wish to marry for love. Alas, Robert's family is in dire financial straits. He and Annie always knew they would one day be wed, but his heart belongs to the household maid, Emma. Meanwhile, Annie's younger sister Victoria longs for freedom. Then the nebulous Old Ones activate game mechanics and arbitrarily assign everyone classes based on whatever they did of note in the last 24 hours. Victoria showed bravery, so she becomes a warrior. Annie lit some lamps that morning, so now she's a wizard and can throw fireballs. Emma buried a dead mouse, and now she's a necromancer. Meanwhile, Robert isn't very pious, but goes through the motions, so I guess he's a cleric. You know how GameLit apocalypse stories give gamers the advantage because they understand how the system should work? Video games don't exist. Tabletop games don't exist. Novels? Goodness, I don't know if that's appropriate for a young lady. Maybe the menfolk play chess. The rules of chess don't seem to translate to fireballs and zombies. Age of Victoria by Alston Sleet is set at the Blythe family's summer manor. Robert and his uncle have come ahead of the rest of the family to prepare for the wedding. There are only 5 servants due to a recent string of firings. Victoria and Annie are the only Blythes in residence, so the cast is pretty small. The system message declares everyone is an NPC, non-player character. If they don't reach level 10 within 10 days, they will be restricted to their starting zone and be quest givers and such. Victoria, already thirsting for freedom, jumps straight into the grind. There are large beetles in the surrounding meadows, and wolves in the forest, despite wolves being extinct in England since the 1500s. And then there's the goblins. So many goblins. How each of the main cast adapt to the apocalypse is the most fun part of the story. In her starting gear, Victoria receives a chain shirt. Upon putting it on, we learn this world follows the chainmail bikini rules. It's described as the top half of a corset. Having regular clothing equipped as well doesn't seem to help. The regular shirt isn't visible, and she's still showing way too much skin for this time period. One of her skills as a warrior is taunt. The system fills in the dialogue, and it's very inappropriate. Victoria wasn't even supposed to know some of those words. If she tries really hard not to speak her taunt, she makes rude gestures. Only the first taunt dialogue is given in full. After that, we're given descriptions of how Victoria and others react to the dialogue, but the exact wording is left to the imagination. Victoria is very enthusiastic and aggressive in this changed world. It feels pretty natural, based on how she acted before the change. The others, on the other hand. Annie was demure and polite. Now she can throw fireballs and quickly becomes very enthusiastic. It's unclear how much of her personality shift is the system and how much is just Annie uninhibited. This is the change that has Victoria most worried. My worry turned to the unmitigated joy Annie was showing, playing with fire. All of us had shown changes from this new world, but none so severe as Annie's. The moment she called upon her magic, her personality seemed to shift. That, or her character was freed from the shackles she willingly bound herself with. Emma and Robert are dealing with 2 sides of the same heresy coin. The others have to encourage them to even use their abilities because it goes against their beliefs. Many of Emma's necromantic spells have verbal components, and she's essentially speaking in tongues. She gains a skeleton minion and can speak through it. Spells also have some flavor text with the descriptions, and hers sound really, really evil. A cleric is a religious leader, and Robert certainly doesn't feel qualified for the title. Plus, his magic comes from the Old Ones, not the Christian God. Old Ones sounds pretty heathen. He's also got to have overcome the gender role that's been ingrained his whole life. He has more hit points and defense than Annie or Emma, but he needs to let Victoria take the lead. He can't even do much damage. I'm casting healing spells which are supposedly powered through my belief in the divine and mana. That's a miracle. I'm not the Messiah. I'm not worthy of that kind of power. I'm not even sure if it is divine. It could be some demonic force trying to corrupt me. A big chunk of the book follows the group fighting their way through a goblin-infested dungeon, grinding their way up toward level 10. If you enjoy lots of fight scenes, this may be right up your alley. I felt it started to drag, and I wanted them to hurry back to the social implications of the apocalypse. When they do make it back to the manor, their interactions with Robert's uncle and Annie and Victoria's governess are wonderfully uncomfortable. Age of Victoria is a cool look at how GameLit functions in a non-traditional setting. Generic fantasy world is great, but I like to see authors step outside the box. I only wish they'd leaned harder into the Victorian elements. The prose never quite hits the upper crust tone, and there's some anachronistic language. The character personalities quickly shift towards standard fantasy fare. AOV is good, but I'd love to see someone lean into the time period harder. Give me period romance novel parody, please. Content-wise, there's a lot of fighting monsters, but not much gore. Even major injuries are treated as debuffs, so you know the character will recover eventually. There's a brief scene of child abuse, and an unpleasant moment with a cat. I think Age of Victoria is appropriate for teens, but I wouldn't recommend it to younger readers. What time period would you like to see more in GameLit? Like if you like, book link in the description, all that jazz. Stay magical!